Today is a very exciting day because right here we have, in my opinion, the coolest Golf ever made. And this is of course the 2004 R32. So the US only got this version for one single year and they only imported 5,000 of them. So they are pretty rare. And if you manage to happen to find one in original condition that hasn't been modded to the max, you are very lucky. These are definitely going up in value right now. I can't wait to talk about this front end design and what's different from the normal Golf Mark IV and the side view, the rear, and then we're gonna jump into the interior and then we're gonna take it for a drive. Huge thanks to Stefan of Urban Motors for letting me review this car. They have a very cool selections of very unique cars for sale right now. Go check it out at urbanmotorsco.com or click the link down in the description. Let's start with the front end design of the R32. First of all, I think this is the only color you can get an R32 in. This is the blue one. I think they came in 4 colors, I believe it was. This is definitely the one that I would pick. The reason why I love this front end is that you can clearly see that it is a pretty normal looking Golf, but then when you go down, further down through the bumper, you can see that something's going on down here. This is not your average looking Golf. What we have here is a massive intake. I love this section of intake where you have a big one in the middle and the 2 small ones on the side. It feels like it's a pretty traditional way of adding the intakes in the lower bumper, like we have on the first generation Audi S4, for example, and my favorite, the B5 RS4, also had this type of styling in the lower part of the front end. And here we have this is the grille. So we're talking about big grills today. Have a look at this tiny grille. There are just these 3 slots and the big Volkswagen emblem in the middle. Also have this, of course. I guess this adds to the grille at the bottom. And then you have the R32 logo stuck right here. One graphic detail that was really interesting when this first came out, and the journalists and the media went totally nuts over, that is these headlights. So these headlights have a clear lens to them, and this is one of the first production cars to have that feature, to have the clear lens. So you can see all the internal pieces of the headlights, and this was a huge step forward in headlight technology, something that hadn't been seen in production cars before the R32. Another thing that I love about the Golf Mark IV in general, and specifically the R32, are the proportions. I think this has the most, if you want to think up a hot hatch, what that would look like, it would be a Mark IV in my opinion, and we're gonna look more on that when we look at the side view. And the simplicity in the styling, it still has this pretty angry looking face because of the angle of the headlight going down, and this is, in my opinion, the best looking Golf overall. Even the Giugiaro design, the first generation Golf, I think this just looks better. It looks planted and solid. It doesn't look too big or too small. The proportions are just perfect on this car. Another detail I love are these simple lines that we have in the hood. So we have one line going down here, obviously the same line going down on the other side, connecting to the very starting point of the headlight, in addition to, of course, my favorite feature on the front, and it's still gonna be this bumper in the front. However, what I would change here is obviously to turn this back to stock, because the silver here is not stock. I want to have it the black mesh that we have in the original R32. As you know by now, the side view is the most important view when you have a look at the proportions of this car. And this car to me is one of the best proportioned hot hatches out there, and still to this day. This is to me definitely better looking than the current Golf, and I love these wheels. I'm a huge fan of these multi-spoke 18-inch wheels that we have on the R32. The thing is, I don't think these look too small, and that's the thing, because the car itself is not that big. So 18-inch feels like the perfect size to have on this car. Usually when I make redesigns, I like to add like 21s on here, but in this case, this is a specific car that if I want to buy this car, I would not switch out the wheels on this, because just like the RS5, I think the wheels here are a huge part of the overall design of the car. And then we have this trim piece here that in the facelift of the Mark IV, you turn this into body color, which I think looks a lot better. Another detail I want to emphasize here is the ratio between the greenhouse up here. You have the body down there. It's almost like it's 45-55%. You have 45 up here, 55 at the bottom. If you look at new Golfs, you can see just how much the greenhouse has shrunken. If you overlay a new Golf on top of this, you have the greenhouse being a lot shorter and the body coming up a lot higher, which creates a pretty strong and powerful stance of the car. But still, I think this just looks better with these proportions. So we talked about the smoothness of this area, the front end, but have a look at the side view. Usually when I look at car designs, I want to try and figure out where the shoulder line is. And looking at this car, it is so smooth across the entire side of the car that we don't have a shoulder line of this car. And for some reason, I think it suits this design. It's very unusual to not have a shoulder line on cars, even in this era, the 2004 era. But this car didn't have it, and I think it adds to the cleanliness of the Golf Mark IV overall. One graphic feature that's added onto the R32 that you don't have on the normal Mark IV is, of course, this side skirt. This as well helps bring the car closer to the ground, helps it hug the road better, and I feel like this just adds so much, specifically since it's angled outwards in the bottom, creating this almost ground effect look on this side skirt. A detail that maybe not a lot of people notices, but still makes a huge difference when it comes to the plantedness of the R32. It's time for that 3/4 rear view, and you know what I think about 3/4 rear views. With the wheels turned in the front end, the 18-inch on the side looks just fantastic, specifically when you have the dual exhaust pipes in the bottom, and this sounds really good for the VR6. One thing that I would change here, as well as in the front end that we talked about, is I would like to turn it back to stock. We don't have this white section in the stock R32. And another graphic feature that I think is beautiful on the R32 is this line here from the cut line of the trunk. Then this bumper kind of follows the line of the rear taillights, going in smoothly, and then creates this line. It's kind of like the trunk cuts into the bumper and cutting out this part, kind of extruding it from the bumper. And I think this integration of the bumper and the bumper itself being properly functional bumper that we don't really see in modern cars, it looks really good, of course, in combination again with the dual tailpipes symmetrically positioned in the rear end. Now, one trademark design feature of Golf since the very beginning with the Giugiaro design is this panel here, this C-pillar, and how this cut line cuts in, and then how the taillight follow this line. I think this is one of the best looking sections of the car if we just cut it through the rear axle and onto the back side. I think this just adds more of a movement and dynamic to feeling to the side view, because the C-pillar is so thick compared to the other pillars that it adds some mass in the rear and kind of shoots the car forward. Welcome to the interior of the R32. The first thing you're gonna notice when you jump into this interior are the seats, because have a look at this bolstering. It's the most intense bolstering I think I've ever seen on any production seat. It's just nuts how big these are, but they actually serve a purpose because they definitely hug you when you're going around those twisty corners. In here, otherwise, it's pretty much like a normal Golf. You do have the R32 logo on the tachometer. We do have the vents very visible, not trying to hide it here. The controls for the stereo here and the climate control down here. Last but not least, we have a proper, beautifully shifted 6-speed manual transmission, and you have the good old e-brake right here. The steering wheel, very cool as well. It has some nice thickness to it in the areas where you want it to be thick, and it also has the R logo down here at the bottom. Of course, it's 3-spoke, adding that sporty feel to it. Up here, we actually have soft touch material, which is pretty surprising to me. I thought this was going to be hard plastic, but it's not. I've always loved this housing for the gauge cluster of the Mark IV Golf. I feel like it flows beautifully, and it has this beautiful chamfer going in to the dash itself. It connects very nicely to the dash, and I think that's a beautiful little feature of the Mark IV Golf. And then we have the 4Motion logo here on the gear shifter. Of course, this is an all-wheel drive. You have the most of the power at most times sent to the front wheels, but when they can't handle all that 240 horsepower, it gets sent to the rear if needed. In the middle here, you got 2 cup holders, which is nice to have. No proper armrest in the middle, so you don't really have any storage here. You have a little bin here, which is, I think you can remove this. Looks like this big. It's pretty small, and that's pretty much all the storage that you have in the center armrest. You also have a cup holder back here for the passengers. Welcome to the interior and to the drive of the R32. This is gonna be really fun because when I grew up, this was one of the coolest cars you could have. I remember one guy in my, I think it was high school, he had one of these, and he was, in my opinion, the coolest kid in the entire school. And I tried to bother him, tried to ask him about the car. I was very annoying to him. He probably hated me. I really wanted to talk about the car and see it and sit inside of it and just feel the steering wheel and everything. And now I'm here doing exactly that. Very enjoyable to drive, and I love this 6-speed manual transmission connected to a VR6 engine with 240 horsepower, around 240 pound-feet of torque. 0 to 60 in about 6.4 seconds. I remember the Audi S3, the first generation S3, did it in 6.8 seconds. The thing with these cars is the smaller they are, the better you feel the speed. It feels like going a lot faster than you actually are. And these seats, I mean, they really hug you, and that's no surprise looking at the bolstering that we have on these. But I love the design of these seats. I think it suits, it kind of suits the R32, but it's really weird that they put crazy seats like this in what is, after all, just a Mark IV Golf. Oh, and it sounds really good too. These are the stock pipes. This is what the R32 sounded like when it came out of the factory. And I love the setup of the dual exhaust. Having those like that, when you have them symmetrical, it's always, in my opinion, it always looks better. When you have exhaust on one side, it kind of feels like something is missing. And having them symmetrical like this, it just makes the symmetry of both the front and the rear feel like they're in balance. Wow, sounds fantastic. Turning radius is pretty wide for what it is, a Golf. Very short shifts, not too long. Maybe they could have been even shorter than this. Finding one of these today is relatively hard, and it's very hard to find one in decent condition that hasn't been, you know, crazily modified. And I think this is a good deal, buying one of these, because I think these will actually go up in value. It just sounds so good, this VR6.